All right. So when I started, I mentioned how many months ago, years ago, someone asked me, this is one of the time when I was focused mainly on exercise, and asked me if what I do is Qigong. And I say, well, yes, because Gong means practice. So here we practice Qi. Qi is a life energy. It's the idea that is a bridge between your body and your mind. But then I said something like, I practice it as a journey and not as a destination. So the question is, what is the destination? The destination is emancipation. You say, well, emancipation, what does that mean? Well, once upon a time, much like what we are now, we have not a United States of America, we have an un-United States of America. Back then, the issue was slavery. Now it's something else. But the point is that we finally free the slave, we liberate the slave, but we don't say that. We say we emancipate the slaves. The reason is that no one has the right to claim another human being as their personal property. And since you have no right to claim it as your own, there's no possibility of liberating them. So we use the word emancipation. Return something to that person that belongs to him in the first place. So when we talk about meditation and all the spiritual practice, we also use the word emancipation. It's about emancipating the mind. Let it free. We don't use the word liberate because no one has the right to claim our mind. Our mind should have been free to begin with. Let me talk about something called the 5 hindrances today. But let's go back to last week and start once again, talk about the existence, the degrees of existence of a being. Not just the body, but much more. Right? So at least here we talk about the body and the mind with the Qi, the life energy as the bridge. Back in the days, or even today, the North Indians, the yogis, they think of existence in a much more sophisticated way. They think of it as 5 parts, one on top of each other like the Russian Tao. The outside is what they call the food body. This is the breakfast that I consumed this morning. It's all borrowed, just like you borrow a book from the library. Someday you have to return it. Everything has to be returned. Within that, the North Indians think of it in terms of intellect, a brain. Now, it turns out that both the first one and the second disappear when you die. And then they talk about the Qi. They don't use the word Qi, they call it Nadi, which is the energy that flows through your body from the universe. Again, when you die, it disappears. It goes back to the universe. Then finally, there's 2 more, and one is called the ego, the self. And then finally, in the very inside is your karma. Now, the historical Buddha was also a yogi, and he has a different interpretation of that. It makes it easier for him to teach. So he talks about the 5 skandhas, we start talking about that. The 5 skandhas I mentioned is like the funnel. It's like the goes from one media to another. So the first skandha, first funnel is all about physical stuff. It takes the physics, the outside, the light, the sound, and funnel it through our senses, the eye, the nose, the ear, the tongue, the body, and the mind, all together. Everything that's physical about us is right there. And then the second one is, I call it a sensation, is when after we sense the outside, it generates electricity, it goes in a spiral cord. And then from the spiral cord, it goes into the brain, intellect, which is a small part of the intellectual system. It creates like and dislike, and we then call it the 51 mental factors, remember? And from there, it actually leaves a record, which is the last skandha called consciousness. It leaves a record called karma. And karma can be virtuous or non-virtuous. It's just a copy, it leaves behind. But it's like the seed for the next thought cycle. So if you leave behind a lot of bad karma, remember that I talk about the tree, the banyan tree. Once upon a time, we were pure, we were full of virtuous mental factors, but we had something, a fear, anger, or something that landed next to us. It started to grow and consumes us. And so now what we want to do is to free ourselves from these non-virtuous mental factors. But it's not free or liberation, it's emancipation. Because no one has the right to claim our innermost virtuous self as their own. So I mentioned about this story where the Native American chief tells his grandson, and he says, we have these two wolves that lives within us. One is virtuous and one is non-virtuous. The virtuous is the compassion, the loving kindness, the empathy, and the equanimity. And the non-virtuous is the fear, is the hate, is all of that. Right? Now, the Buddhist has a different take on that. Rather than thinking that it's one or two, that you can choose between the virtuous and the non-virtuous, the Buddhists think differently, and it thinks that the choice is just on the non-virtuous, that we ourselves has always been virtuous. So in the Christianity, they talk about the Holy Spirit. That's within us. It's always been within us. It's just that we're covered by this black cloud that we call the non-virtuous. So once again, the virtuous, there are only, remember I talked about only 11 virtuous factors. Very few, starting with faith, ending with non-violence. Whereas the non-virtuous, the destructive ones, is like 26 over 51. It's more than half. And it starts with ignorance, and it ends, and it goes on. Long list, right? Now, if you take all the non-virtuous mental factors, you can actually summarize it into what is called the 5 hindrances. But before I talk about 5 hindrances, I want to remind ourselves that the practice is about emancipation. It's about removing us from the black cloud of non-virtuous thoughts so that we can get back into the real self, the real us, which are virtuous to begin with. And so it's really about changing our karma. So everything that we do is about changing the karma, reversing the karma. It's like the banyan tree. The inside is trying to get out. The outside is the karma, it's the bad karma, and it's trying to get out. So next week and the week after, I will talk about the practice of how to overcome that karma and emancipating us from these bad karma. That's the practice. But before that, I want to talk about these non-virtuous mental factors again. These at least 26 non-virtuous, what we call a-kusala. Kusala is the virtuous. A-kusala is the opposite of kusala. So we take all the a-kusala, the non-virtuous mental factors, and we summarize it into 5 things. And they are called the 5 hindrances, meaning that they're like the black cloud that covers our inner energy, inner self. It's like the black cloud covering the sun. Okay? So the 5 hindrances, the first one is called attachment. Attachment. We know what attachment means. When we break up with someone, we don't want that. Right? She walks away from me. That's not my choice. I become very attached to her. When I had a good meal, I like it so much that I become very attached to that. Now, you might think that, oh, we only become attached to the Not true. We're actually much more attracted to the non-virtuous. That's the problem. Actually, we like anger. We like it a lot. Imagine, just think about your friends that you have and how many of them are toxic friends, but you like them anyway because you actually like sitting around and bitch about someone else. So we get attached to that. The second one is called aversion. It's the opposite of attachment. Attachment is when you want to have more of it, whether it's virtuous or non-virtuous. Aversion is when you want to push that away. When you want to push that away, right? And then finally, the next two in modern term is just depression and anxiety. Depression is when you want to do something but you don't find the energy. Anxiety is the opposite, right? When you can't calm your mind and focus, and you become, and so when people talk about anxiety and depression, they think that it's the mind, but actually it is who we are. It is who we are. Those who cannot tame the mind, they end up with these 5 hindrances. 2 of them is one is depression and one is anxiety. We often have both. It's called bipolar. The last one is the one that's most common, is doubt, loss of faith. Now, it's important that we understand the election that we had 3 weeks ago. And it's important to understand, for me, to understand why I am so upset by it. I am upset by it not because of one person win and the other person didn't. That happens every time. I'm upset because the first president that I was able to elect after I became a citizen, I came in this country in 1971. It wasn't until Ronald Reagan was running against Carter that I was eligible to vote. And Ronald Reagan was my first president. That was the days when all presidential campaigns were focused on the virtuous. Ronald Reagan's famous slogan was, "It's morning again in America." He talks about the shiny city on a hill. He inspires us with the purpose of establishing a society that is inspirational, that we work towards the common good, that we want to have a non-bearing small government, and we wanted to share civic virtues. Whether you believe him or not, back then, when you run for president, you focus on the virtuous. We talk about a candidate that has a very high moral standard because we want them to inspire us. We want them to inspire us. We want them to be of a very high standard. I want to share with you something. I actually took it out from my treasure bin. In his second term, his second year, I was a professor at UCLA. And I got selected as one of the 50 young professors in the country, one per state. There's another 50 that are the physics professors, young professors, also one per state. This is my certificate with Ronald Reagan's signature, and it was 1986. I'm 68 years old, and I've been in this country since I was 15, and every day I want to live up to that. Being in America was not my birthright, but I want to make damn sure that I'm worthy of it, worthy to be part of the shiny city on a hill. And after Reagan, every president candidate after that focused on the virtuous. When George H.W. ran, his slogan was kinder, gentler nation. When Bill Clinton ran, his slogan was putting people first. George W. was compassionate conservatism. Barack Obama was a man of few words. It was either hope or forward. Even John McCain, who ran against Barack Obama, says country first. But things started to change. John McCain selected Sarah Palin as his running mate, thinking that he just wanted to have a female, a governor who's in the executive branch, to compensate for him. Little did he know that he elected someone who understood something that we still don't quite understand today, which is the United States, the U, actually stands for unrepresented. That a big part of a country consists of people not middle class, not working class, but working poor. And these people are, by large, uneducated. They don't have college degree. Unskilled even. They work part-time jobs, this and that. They mostly don't read. That's why podcast is so important these days. They are rather uninformed. They are uncurious about the world. They don't travel. If you look at the map of people who have passports, those who are in the so-called red states, they don't tend to have passports. It's the people in the blue states that have passports. Now, I'm not trying to put down anyone. I'm just saying that Sarah Palin was the person who recognized that and recognized that presidential campaign is not inspirational anymore. That it's all about grievance. This is the time when all of a sudden they realize that those virtuous factors are few and far in between. That if you focus on the non-virtuous factors, you actually have a better chance of winning. It took Trump to understand that and weaponize it. And so if you look at his slogan, the slogan is about grievance. It's about those who are not represented currently by the government. Make America great again. It's all about grievance. Those who understand it understand that it's about making America white again. And they reject everything else that is not white, everything else like that. But they're just playing with our emotion. Now, I'm not saying that the other side doesn't play with emotion. They play equally. All I'm saying is that if you understand how your emotion works, understand the 51 mental factors, understand that you're fully capable of being one or the other, then you will stop being a prey to the predators, and you can actually live a more unhindered life. And that's what we're all about, is to emancipate our mind, free of the influences from the outside.